Hey creepers, welcome to the Mrs. Night Terror channel. Join me as I tell you spooky, shocking, and scary bedtime tales. Each story is a fictional narrative, so don't worry too much about it coming true. If you think you can handle it, listen closely and imagine yourself being part of each and every story I tell. I want to say thank you to each creeper out there. This is the next episode of my scary story series, and surely not the last. If you enjoy what you hear, be sure to give me a follow and leave a comment below to let me know what you enjoyed the most. Today, I have a truly terrifying story for you that'll send shivers up your spine. So grab a blanket, turn off the lights, and let's get started with this not-so-true crime nightmare. Tonight's tale is called The Illness. The world seemed to shatter when the doctor delivered the news. Jane's mind blurred as she tried to process the words. Terminal illness. There is no cure. You only have a limited time. She sat in the sterile room, the white walls closing in, feeling like she was suffocating under the weight of her new reality. Her heart broke into 1,000 pieces. The future she had envisioned evaporating in an instant. She was barely 30. She had yet to experience childbirth, get married, or travel out of the country. Leaving the hospital, Jane wandered aimlessly through the city. She needed to escape, to find a place where she could be alone with her thoughts and her pain. Jane found herself drawn to the old train tracks on the outskirts of town. The tracks had long been abandoned, overgrown with weeds and wildflowers. It was a place of solitude, far from the noise and the chaos of the city. As she walked along the rusty rails, she felt cold air nipping at her cheeks. A storm was brewing in the horizon. With each step, she tried to grapple with the enormity of her situation. Her life, once full of promise and potential, now seemed like a cruel joke. Tears blurred her vision, but she kept walking, hoping to find some form of peace or clarity. The sky darkened, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Jane barely noticed it first. She was lost in her thoughts. But soon the rain became a torrential downpour. She was soaked within minutes, her clothes clinging to her skin, her hair plastered to her face. Desperation drove her to run, her footsteps echoing in the tracks as she searched for shelter. Through the curtain of the rain, Jane spotted a building she had never seen before. It was a large brick structure, with a slight light glowing in one of the windows, so she assumed somebody had to be there. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if it was real or a figment of her imagination, but the rain showed no signs of letting up, and she had no other options. Jane hurried towards the building, her heart pounding. She reached the door and pushed it open, the creak of the hinges barely audible over the sound of the storm outside. Yet, inside, it was dimly lit and eerily quiet. She called out, "Hello, is anyone here?" but received no response. The interior was surprisingly well kept, considering the exterior's weathered appearance. The walls were lined with old bookshelves, filled with stacks of tarot cards and candles, and the air smelled faintly of mildew and aged paper. Jane felt a strange sense of calm wash over her as she explored the building, the storm raging outside, now just a distant rumble. Jane wandered through the rooms, looking for any sign of the owner. She found a small sitting area with a cozy fireplace, its embers still glowing faintly. She took off her wet coat and hung it over the chair to dry, then sat down in front of the fire, warming her cold hands. The crackling flames provided a welcoming comfort, their gentle light casting shadows on the wall that danced around like old spirits haunting the place. As she sat there, Jane noticed an old thick book on the coffee table. It was bound in dark leather. Its cover had strange symbols she didn't recognize. She picked it up, and the weight of it feeling solid and reassuring in her hands. When she opened it, she found that it was filled with handwritten notes and sketches detailing what happened to someone's personal journey. Intrigued, Jane began to read. The entry spoke of a man who had once lived in the building, a scholar who had dedicated his life to studying the mysteries of the universe. His words were filled with wonder and curiosity, a stark contrast to Jane's current state of despair. She found herself drawn to the story, the details of his life providing a welcome distraction from her own troubles. Hours passed as she lost herself in the pages. The storm continued to rage outside. Jane was lost in thought, the warmth of the fire lulling her into a rare moment of peace when the door creaked open behind her. She turned quickly, her heart skipping a beat as two women entered the room. They were identical, with long blonde hair that cascaded down their backs and eyes that seemed to shimmer with the ethereal light. Their presence was both unsettling and mesmerizing. A strange aura of mystery surrounded them. The women moved with fluid grace, almost as if they were gliding across the floor. They stopped a few feet away from Jane, their gazes fixed intently on her. In perfect unison, they spoke, their voices harmonizing in a way that sent shivers down Jane's back. "Are you here to be healed?" they asked. Their tone was both soothing and mysterious. Jane felt a jolt of shock. "Healed," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "How did you know I was sick?" The women exchanged a knowing glance, their expressions unreadable. "We have a keen intuition," one of them said. "We can sense the pain and suffering," the other added. "It calls out to us." Jane felt a flicker of hope mixed with suspicion. "Who are you?" she asked. Her curiosity was piqued. "We are healers," they replied in unison. "Of sorts," one of them said. The room seemed to grow warmer, the air thick with the unspoken promise. Jane's mind raced, torn between skepticism and the desperate longing for a miracle. "You said you could heal me?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and hope. The women nodded, their movements eerily synchronized. "Yes," one of them said, "we offer a way to cure yourself." "If you dare be interested," the other finished. Jane's heart pounded in her chest. The logical part of her mind screamed that it was impossible, that she was grasping at straws. But another part, the part that had been touched by the scholar's book and the fire's warmth, urged her to take a leap of faith. She had nothing to lose. "What do I have to do?" Jane asked, her voice barely steady. The women smiled, a serene and almost otherworldly expression. "Come with us," they said together. "We will show you the way." The mysterious women led Jane through a series of winding corridors within the building. The interior seemed to expand, the hallway stretching longer than the exterior would suggest. The air grew colder and tinged with a faint scent of herbs and earth, adding to the surreal atmosphere. They finally reached a heavy wooden door adorned with intricate carvings. One of the women pushed it open, revealing a room bathed in soft golden light. The walls were lined with shelves filled with jars of various herbs, giant crystals, and ancient scrolls. In the center of the room stood a stone altar, its surface covered with symbols that pulsed with a faint rhythmic glow. In the center was a statue of a man. Jane recognized him. It was the man from the book near the fireplace. "This is where your healing begins," one of the women said, gesturing for Jane to approach the altar. Jane hesitated, feeling a mixture of awe and trepidation. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous room. "It is a sanctuary," the other woman replied, "a place where the boundaries between worlds are thin, and the ancient knowledge of healing resides." The women moved to either side of the altar, their hands hovering above its surface. They began to chant softly, their voices intertwining into a melodic incantation. The symbols of the altar glowed brighter, casting light that enveloped Jane. "Lie down," one of them instructed gently. "And close your eyes," added the other. Jane did as she was told, her heart racing with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety, a little bit of fear, but curiosity. As she lay down on the cool stone, she felt a very strange energy coursing through her body, both comforting and invigorating. The chanting grew louder, filling the room with a harmonious resonance. Jane felt herself drifting, her consciousness slipping into a state between waking and dreaming. She saw flashes of light, glimpses of ancient forests and serene landscapes, and she heard whispers of long-forgotten languages. Time seemed to lose meaning as she floated in this liminal space, her body and mind both relaxed and very alert. Gradually, the chanting faded, and Jane felt both a gentle touch on her forehead. She opened her eyes to see the blonde women hovering over her, their faces serene and kind. "It's done," one of them said softly. "You have been given the gift of healing." Jane sat up slowly, her body tingling with a newfound vitality. She felt different, lighter, as if she had lifted a great burden from her shoulders. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. The women chuckled. "You go and live your life, Jane." Jane got up. She got an odd feeling in her gut. She never said her name to these women. In that moment, she began to panic. "I need to go," she yelled. The journey back to her home was a blur, her mind racing with the events of the night. The rain had stopped, leaving the world refreshed and glistening under the moonlight. The promise of healing filled her with cautious optimism, a belief that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. She reached her front door and typed in her passcode, but the familiar beep was absent. Instead, an error message flashed on the keypad. Frowning, she tried again, but it failed to unlock. Confused, she pulled out her key and inserted it into the lock, but it wouldn't turn. The door, though familiar, seemed subtly different, yet she couldn't pinpoint exactly what had changed. A sense of unease crept over her. She went around to the back of her house, hoping to climb through the window she left open. But the window was shut tight, and no amount of jiggling could open it. Frustration turned to panic as she began to question her reality. Just then, a man appeared around the corner, his face a mask of concern. "Excuse me, can I help you?" he asked her. His tone was polite, but very wary. Jane spun around, startled. This is my home," she said, the words coming out more of a plea than a statement. "I live here. Something's wrong with the locks." The man's brow furrowed in confusion. "I'm sorry, but I've lived here for years. Are you sure you have the right house?" Jane felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "No, you don't understand. I've lived here for years," she insisted, her voice rising with desperation. "This is my house." He shook his head, pulling out his phone. "I think you need some help. I can call someone for you." Panic gripped her as she backed away. No, that's not necessary." She turned and ran to the driveway, expecting to see her car. But the space was empty. Her car, her familiar touchstones, were nowhere to be found. Everything she owned seemed to have vanished. Realization dawned painfully slow. This was not her home. Embarrassment and confusion flooded her as she stumbled away. Jane wandered the streets, her mind spinning. The neighborhood looked familiar, yet subtly altered. The houses were the same, but colors, details, and even landscaping seemed different. It was as if she had stepped into a parallel universe, one where her existence had been erased. She reached the park where she often walked, hoping to find some peace and maybe some familiar scenery, but even here, the path seemed slightly off, the benches placed in new positions. Her heart sank as she realized she was truly alone in a world that no longer recognized her. She sat at the bench, head in her hands, trying to make sense of the situation, the healing ritual, the strange women, the unethereal sanctuary. Everything felt like a dream. Was it possible that while seeking a cure, she had transported to a different reality? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice. "Are you all right?" Jane looked up to see an elderly woman standing before her, concern etched in her wrinkled face. "I don't know," Jane admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know where I am. Everything's just different now." The woman sat beside her. She provided a comforting presence. "Sometimes life takes us on unexpected journeys. Can you tell me your name?" "Jane," she replied, her voice trembling. "Jane Harper." The woman's eyes widened slightly. "Jane Harper, but that's—" She hesitated, then continued gently, "Jane Harper is my mother's name." Jane looked at the woman. "Where is your mother?" The woman reached out, placing a comforting hand on Jane's arm. "She passed away many years ago, dear. She had a terminal illness." And as we draw the curtains on this chilling tale, our hearts still racing and our minds haunted by the echoes of the unknown, remember that the darkness we've explored is but a glimpse into the abyss that dwells within us all. In the realm of the mysterious, we find both terror and fascination in these shadows. We confront the human nature of our uncharted territories. Thanks to each and every creeper out there who takes the time to listen to my horrifying stories. Remember to follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and X. And be sure to check out my Patreon for much darker tales, ones that are far too naughty for YouTube. And fear not, as you step back into the realm of the familiar, let the shivers down your spine remind you that life's greatest mysteries are the ones that keep us awake at night, asking us to peer into the abyss and challenge the boundaries of our understanding. And until next time, dear listeners, may your dreams be undisturbed, and may you find solace in the light of day. Good night and sweet dreams, if you dare.